What's up, guys? Neckbeard Man back with you again. I need to shave terribly bad. But I decided to make another video today. And, well, sorry this one took so long to get out. I set up a poll on my thing because I have access to the community stuff now on YouTube, which is cool. So I set up a poll, and what was that, like a week ago? Like early last week? It's now Saturday of this week, so it was like at least a Saturday ago, and then a few days. Anyway, I set up a poll and asked, what people wanted to see, because I had a couple ideas, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So the vote was between some sort of wrestling topic thing that irks me, which I'll probably still get to at some point, or a more fun, if you can call me talking into a camera fun, a more fun video on, a topic that I'm a little bit more fond of and not angry about. So that's what we're doing today, because the poll showed to the one person, I haven't checked it in a week, but to the one person that I saw voted, they said fun topic about a fun thing. So here you go. The topic that I want, I go through phases. If I lean myself back, I know my camera setup is not the best. I don't know what's the deal with my clip thing, but it doesn't want to hang on as well. There we go. That's a little better. Aha. That's somewhat more okay. Anyway. The topic I wanted to go with today, as I've wasted 2 minutes already, was there's a video game series that I like a lot and that I think more people should play, because it is kind of a niche genre here. It's a Japanese game, and no, I'm not one of those anime types. It's not one of those things. But it originates from Japan. It's about the only game series that I'm like really invested in. Anyway, game series, it's not any of the big ones, but it's a game series called Ace Combat. And if you haven't heard of that before, I don't necessarily blame you, because like I said, it's pretty niche, and I think it's more popular in the States than it is in or it's more popular in Japan than it is in the States, is what I meant to say. There's a pretty decent sized community that enjoy the game series here, but not nearly as big. Like, we don't even get any sort of merchandise for the game here. You have to go through some sort of international ordering, weird, expensive to even get it here, because it only ships to Japan, and you got to do some weird rigmarole to figure it out. But regardless, there is still a community for it here, and I am a part of that, because I've played the vast majority of the games. I haven't played every one of the games, but I've played the main ones. There are some kind of niche ones that are on consoles that I just don't have and are more scarce. But regardless, the game started, from what I could, off the top of my head, I remember, from what I could understand, from doing some research and playing the games as much. From what I understand, they started as, I think, an arcade cabinet called Air Combat in the 90s. And then that cabinet game got ported to the PS1. So, and I have I actually own a copy of the Air Combat PS1 version. It's pretty cool. So it started with Air Combat, and then it got the port, and I believe that there was an Air Combat 2 that released a sequel to it, but through some naming weirdness or whatever with the launch of the game, the name got changed, at least in the States. I think actually in both Japan and the States for this one, got changed to Ace Combat. And so that's where the Ace Combat 2 PS1 games come from. And that's kind of what started the whole series, and it's still named Ace Combat today. So, started there, and now we are on the 7th installment of Ace Combat. The most recent one released in 2019, I think. Ace Combat 7, with a ton of spin-offs here and there for a multitude of different consoles and whatever else. But the main story is up to 7. So, my story with Ace Combat is, when I was a little kid, I was a PS2 kid. I had a PS2, and we had a Wii too, but PS2 was kind of my thing. That's what I started on and still played, and I still have it, and I still have all the games for it that I did. And I've even been adding to the collection because I love the PS2 games, and there's a ton of great PS2 games. That, it just kind of takes you back to a time where a lot of game companies actually cared about their games and the process behind making them and put passion into to what became an art form. Anyway, that's a rant for a different day, how far gaming has fallen. But regardless, my journey with Ace Combat started with Ace Combat 4, which was a good place to start because the main story arc of the game starts with the 4th installment, because Air Combat 1, Air Combat, and Ace Combat 2 were kind of, they were, like I said, they were game cabinet games. They were just kind of there for fun and had a story behind them, but the main continual story kind of started with 4, and 3 is weird, and I can talk about 3 later, but Ace Combat 3 is a weird one. But my journey started with Ace Combat 4. If you didn't know, I think I mentioned in a previous video, if you didn't know, I am a history buff. I am majoring that in college right now, in military history, and my thing when I was a little kid was airplanes. I loved military airplanes. And that is what Ace Combat is about. It's an arcadey flight shooter game that doesn't rely on any sort of conventional air combat. Like, it's not a simulator or anything like that. I think it's technically classified as a simulator, but it's not a simulator. It's just an arcade, flight game for fun. So me being so interested in military planes, we were in I think like a family video when those existed, kind of like Blockbuster's family videos. If you're too young to understand, then I'm sorry. I think it was a family video in a town nearby where I lived. I can't remember exactly which town it was, but it's one of the bigger towns around where I lived. And I was with my mom, and we were in this family video renting movies or whatever. We would just go to there just to rent, if you know what a Blockbuster or family video is, that's just, what it's like. So a lot of the times those places had games to rent or buy. And in this, games to buy section, there was a game sitting there for $20, and it had these crazy cool F-22 jet fighters, and they were flying through explosions and stuff, and I was like, Mom, this game looks awesome. I just looked at the box. This game looks awesome. And it was like $20, and so she got me that game, and that's where I started with Ace Combat, and I am so glad that I did, because I love that game series. What should be just a very run-of-the-mill action arcadey game that's kind of addicting because of its arcade value is actually way more than that And they started that with 4, especially in the games past 4. What should be just a regular arcadey, flight game where you zip around and have like way too many missiles than your aircraft can carry, and you just blow up these targets all over the place and try to get high scores and stuff. They turned into this like really crazy good narrative game that actually has a decent story behind it and a amazing soundtrack behind. Pretty much all of the games have incredibly awesome soundtracks that aren't just there for the arcade value, that are like actual orchestral pieces that are like emotional and are really like it's almost like if it were made for a movie score, not arcade jet game shooty explosion thing. So that's the main reason why I love these games, because they just have that really cool, actually well thought out, decent story behind them, that in a game that it shouldn't. And for someone who's obsessed with military aviation and cool fighter pilot stuff, like I said, not realistic at all, but it's a fond thing that even when I go back to today, yes, there's a ton of nostalgia behind them, but when I play them again today, even with the nostalgia factor, if I try to take that off, I'm like, man, these are still really fun, really good games. Not even just me being nostalgic for them, just actually impressive, fun mechanics, good story, great soundtrack, awesome game to me. And why I say that I wish that it was played more is because, in an age where gaming, at least major game companies have sucked all the life out of it, of the, them creating games, and every game feels soulless and just a cash grab, These older games, and even newer ones now, still seem like they have a lot of, passion and energy put behind them, which I really enjoy. So the main story starts with 4. Basic synopsis to wet. I'm not going to spoil anything, but basic synopsis to wet your palate. If you are interested in playing, I would start with 4, because that's just kind of the starting. You don't have to. Each game does a good job of explaining the sequence of events. Like all the games are in ways related, but if you play them in different orders, it doesn't necessarily ruin the experience, because they're all separate enough stories from one another that you can still get the gist. Anyway, I'm off track. So 4 in general begins as a war between two nations after the fall of an asteroid, which all of the nations in the world, this universe is not real. They call it strange real. That's the reimagined Earth world that this game series takes place on. 4 is after this fall of an asteroid, all of the different nation states built these crazy weapons to stop their own demise, like the end of the world. So a lot of these nations used these weapons as the asteroid came down, and were able to at least shoot parts of it up so that the entire world did not end. But, still, of course, fragments fell to the earth and, caused a great crisis of refugees and death and destruction and, floods and tsunamis and whatever else. So there's still bad times had for all, but not as bad as it could have been. So spawning from this crisis after the asteroid fell, these two nations, well, not two nations, This one particular nation that's called Erusia has basically been acting as the world's FEMA by themselves. They've been basically forced by a lot of other nations to take in a bunch of refugees and, attempt to feed and house them and whatever. And by the mid-2000s in-universe, this asteroid fell in 1994 in-universe. By the mid-2000s, they're fed up with being bullied by the other nations, so the Erusian nation launches a campaign across the entire continent that it sits on and takes the land of pretty much all the other nations that were trying to force them to take in all their refugees. So this war starts, and it's Erusia versus a quickly formed coalition of the other states' militaries that they call ISAF in the game. And so ISAF forms to fight back the Erusians, and it's just a conglomerate of all the different nations that got invaded. I don't know if the nations that got invaded are ever necessarily named in the game, but you're just ISAF. So, as it goes, the Erusians are making a lot of ground, and you, as the brand new heroic recruit pilot, get, sent in as, the feigning last breaths of the army, or of the Air Force, and pretty much all of the ISAF forces, and you have to save the day. And as you continue on your campaign, you almost single-handedly, because you're the main character, take back land and hit supply lines and force the Erusians back until you eventually win the war. So it's very fun. I love 4. It's so fun. It's old. It's the oldest of the main, like I said, it's where it all started. But, like I said, music's great. The radio chatter is amazing. A lot of the story is told through the radio of other pilots and whatever talking to you, which is very cool. I like that dynamic. So that's 4. That's where I started. 5, brief synopsis. This takes place 2010 and is of really no relation to the war that happened in 4. The only relation is just it's in the same universe and the asteroid fell, so there's mega weapons and stuff. So in 2010 in universe, you are part of a flight off the coast of this nation called Osea, and Osea is the biggest, it's like the United States of the in-universe countries. It's, one of the biggest world superpowers and very influential on the world stage. Osea is at peace, has been at peace since a big war happened 15 years prior, which we'll get to. But 15 years prior, the end of that war saw a lot of nuclear detonations, and since then the nations involved have basically renounced their militaries and sought an everlasting peace, which, spoiler alert, doesn't happen. Eventually your nation, as you're a new trainee, gets invaded by a nation across the ocean, which is called Yuktobania, which is like the in-universe stand-in for the Soviet Union. The two nations have this huge mega battle, and you, in the consequence of losses, are put in charge of this new squadron. And you have to lead, much like the previous game, you have to lead your squadron and your forces back, from the brinks of defeat back to victory. There's a common theme among a lot of the Ace Combat games. But partway through the game, you start to realize there's some sort of a plot that's behind the entire war, and that's where I'm going to stop, because that's a very good plot twist. Now, the war 15 years prior is discussed in the next game, which is Ace Combat Zero, which is a prequel. Ace Combat Zero is it is a lot of people's quintessential game. I think 5 has the best overall story and music and everything, but 0 is still an awesome game. And there's 3 different paths you can play that give you slightly different outcomes in that one. That's what's really cool. And these are all on the PS2, mind you. 0 is you're not fighting necessarily as a member of a nation's military. You're actually a mercenary. And this huge war has broke out. This happens in 1995, I think, which is why, the 15 years ago thing from the previous game. There's this nation called Belka, and Belka is a dwindling nation. Once a world superpower, they had a huge economic collapse and had to sell off a bunch of their land to survive, to make money. And they were struggling for resources, and the money wasn't good, and eventually the part of the nations that spawned out of them selling land found natural resources, abundant natural resources that the Belkans wanted. So the Belkans spent some time basically dumping all of their remaining funds into expanding their military-industrial complex, and then just launched a massive invasion on literally everyone surrounding them to regain their land. Of course, this created a coalition again with Osea as one of the main... Osea, Yuktobania, and a lot of the minor states that spawned from Belka selling their land. And so you fight for a mercenary group from the country of Ustio, which spawned from Belka. And as this mercenary, you and your wingman named Pixie go on to try to... As however you play the game, you can play it as a altruistic knight who, is very chivalrous in his battle scheme, or you can play it as an absolute maniac who kills everyone in sight, and that's the minor differences. So in this huge war, you get to fight the elite forces of Belka and push them back far until they reach the brink of their own destruction, in which they basically secure their own destruction in a nuclear fashion, which by that point I don't want to continue further because there's a lot of spoilers ahead. That's just the main trilogy. And as I see if I'm running this video very long, I may have to discuss the other games in a future video. If that interests you, leave a comment if you would like to see that. I can discuss the other games, because there's a 6th and a 7th, because 0 is technically the 6th, even though it's called 0. There's a 6th and 7th games to go over, plus there's a bunch of spin-offs. So if you want me to do a short, synopsis of 6, 7, and a couple of the more well-known spin-off games, then I can do that if you want. If you don't want me to do that, let me know too, because this got way more long-winded than I wanted it to. But you wanted fun topic that I like, so there you go. Ace Combat, great game. If you haven't played it, give it a shot. If you can find ways to play, if you have a PS2, you could probably find some copies of 4, 5, and 0 on the, on Amazon, or maybe GameStop has one. I bought 0 off GameStop because I never had 0 when I was a kid. I had 4 and 5. I eventually got 5 after I got 4, but I didn't have 0 until a couple of years ago. I had never played it. And I didn't have 6 either. I'm actually still in the process of playing through 6. I know the general story of 6, but maybe I should hold off on my explanation until I finish Ace Combat 6. Regardless, if you haven't tried it, and what I have said makes you interested in some way, shape, or form, then I would highly suggest trying it. Even if you just do 7, 7 is probably the easiest one to get because it's on all consoles and PC. 7's a decent game. Do I like it better than the PS2 ones? Not necessarily, but it's, it's Ace Combat. It's still fun, decent story. I can't not recommend it. So, anyway, maybe my next video will be a more ranty wrestling topic thing that's bugging me. But regardless, I'm drinking a watermelon dew today. So, I think I've already said a review on this one. It's good. So, peace out.